Please be seated. Perhaps the most talked about TV show of the pandemic has been Ted Lasso on Apple Plus. In the midst of one of the most challenging seasons of our communal lives, millions of us have gotten hooked on a show about building community through love. Did you think that maybe I was going to say that we'd been hooked on a comedy about an American football coach who finds himself coaching an English football club? Or about a folksy, naively optimistic, relentlessly kind guy who goes around disarming all the hard-nosed, edgy competitors around him? Both of those things are definitely true. Ted Lasso actually got its start as a character comedy sketch made for promoting soccer on NBC. Titled An American Coach in London, Jason Sudeikis of Saturday Night Live had the starring role. In this original sketch, Lasso is holding court in a press conference saying, "We're going to play until there's a winner and there's a loser." And a reporter interjects, "Or a tie." And he says, "Wait, you can tie?" And then the scene breaks to a one-on-one interview in which Lasso reflects, if you try to end a game in a tie in the United States, that might be listed in Revelations as one of the causes of the apocalypse. When the commercial sketches were ultimately released as a TV series in 2020, they chose to develop further the character of Ted Lasso, not only as a coach in an athletic competition that he doesn't understand, but also as a man who doesn't exactly follow social expectations. He brings his boss cookies every morning. She thinks he's trying to manipulate her with the best store-bought treats she's ever tasted, but actually he's baking them at home and carefully putting them in a pretty little box for her because he knows that she likes them. When everyone around him is serious about the team winning or serious about the team's financial prospects, Lasso interjects some silly, self-deprecating humor to lighten their mood and change their perspective. The motto that he hangs on the locker room wall to inspire and ground his team is simply believe. Of course, the not-so-surprising plot of season 1 is that the team owner really wanted this inept American football coach to come in and kill the team. But I won't spoil it for those who haven't watched. That simply isn't the game that Lasso is playing. What's funny about the show is that Lasso barely knows the rules of English football. It's funny that he seems to innocently fend off the cynicism around him with punny little jokes. But what's touching and profound about the show is that Ted Lasso is playing life by a different set of rules. And he's building a community around a rule of kindness and love. And it's transforming lives. As we step into Jesus' journey with his disciples in the Gospel of Mark today, we pick up the story right after Jesus has just predicted his suffering, death, and resurrection. It's the third of his passion predictions, and the disciples clearly are not getting it yet. In a similar way to the people who react to Ted Lasso with that "is this guy for real" sort of attitude, it's like the disciples are calling Jesus off sides here. He's way too close to the opponent's goal at the wrong time. And he doesn't even know it because, like me, he doesn't really understand what it means to be off sides. So James and John just sort of call Jesus back to the only game that they know. Okay, you say you have to suffer and die, but now really, Jesus, let's talk about who's going to sit at your right hand and your left and your glory. And Jesus sighs. You don't even know what you're talking about. That's not the game I'm playing. Jesus calls them all together and asks them to operate differently than the world. Be different. He calls them to play a different game. James and John live in Palestine in the first century. Their society, government, even their religion is dominated by Rome. It's a culture in which it is considered shameful to be dominated by another. And so it's every man's goal to climb to the top of their own little heap. James and John have already been chosen to be among Jesus' 12 disciples. But they'd like to be at the top of that particular heap. It really doesn't sound very much different from where we are today. Everywhere we go, the game is about who is in charge, who has the most influence, who gets the bigger paycheck, who do we all look to? And Jesus tells his followers to get out of that rat race and keep to their purpose instead. The game, he says, is not about power at all, but rather about finding life by giving ourselves. It's just a different game altogether. Following him, the game is about being obedient. Following him, the game is about giving over our wills to God's will. And when we do that, we're not going to be obsessed with gaining powers for ourselves, but instead we're going to be focused on empowering others. And that's really the game that Jesus is interested in. So Jesus doesn't want his disciples competing for places of power among them. To do that is to miss the true opportunity that is right in front of them if only they can pay attention to the life that Jesus is revealing to them. If they can put down that game that they've been playing and play the one that Jesus is inviting them to, they're going to get to see the kingdom of heaven. This is what happens in Ted Lasso as well. Because on Lasso's team, there are two star players, Jamie Tart and Roy Kent, and they compete for everything. They compete in soccer, who's the better player, who is the bigger star. They compete in life. Jamie is young, talented, and obnoxiously arrogant. Roy is talented but much older, with a solid shell of pride that he uses to keep people from getting too close. Jamie and Roy even compete in love too, vying for the affections of one woman. So no one would ever expect these two to do anything for one another. Yet, both characters evolve dramatically under Ted's steady kindness, culminating in the aftermath of another loss on the field. Jamie's belligerent father bursts into the locker room after the game and derides and humiliates his son in front of the whole team. It devolves into an exchange of blows that cracks the protective shield of arrogance held so closely by Jamie. And Jamie is just barely holding himself together when Roy Kent, usually so gruff, so distant, steps in to embrace Jamie in his pain. It is no longer what happened on the field that matters. The team stands by silently watching in awe. Because the kingdom of heaven is an awesome sight to behold. Too often we miss it because we're just too busy playing the wrong game. Jesus said, "For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." It's like we've been kidnapped. Our world may be filled with power plays, but the truth is we've been duped, kidnapped and held for ransom by an evil one that lets us play at having power, but keeps us from the only power that really matters. And that power is love. As disciples of Jesus, the Christian leadership to which we are called is not about amassing power. It's about empowering others. It's about respecting the dignity of every human being, helping those who are in need, and sharing with one another the strength, freedom, and opportunity to love, even when that means letting go of our own positions of power in the world. As Jimi Hendrix said it, when the power of love overcomes the love of power, then the world will know peace.